Hello and welcome to the show where people talk about things. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm your host, Slave, and I'm joined as always by my very good friends, Slave and Eugene.
Oh, sweet. I thought it was going to be Slave too, but...
I
really pulled the rug.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
What do you want me to
Pulled the
say?
rug out from under you, Eugene.
I do notice that you did let Slave take off his mask for this, but I really wish you had kept it on because he's not looking real good.
He doesn't look great, no. I think I'm
just
going to
don't
have him put
know
his
what you
mask
want
back
me to
on.
say.
Slave, put your mask back on.
He only has no hands now, so that's good.
He's only got no hands.
He only got no hands. Yeah, he can't put the mask on.
Well, it's your boys. We're back with another Minipod, and this week we're talking about the 2008 horror film The Poughkeepsie Tapes, directed by John Eric Dowdle of the Dowdle Brothers, and we're going to jump into that, but before we do... Last week, when we did our Strangers episode, we actually forgot to do our predictions updates. So we're going to do that now.
All right, so for The Strangers, Pray at Night.
Pray at Night.
Matisse, you predicted this movie would have a 32 on Rotten Tomatoes and make $40 million at the box office. Eugene, you expected 15 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it would make $2 million.
Wow, yeah, I was rough on
You
that.
lowballed hard,
Right.
dude.
I guessed that it would get a 12 on Rotten Tomatoes and make $8 million.
What are the actual numbers?
38% on
So it has-
Rotten Tomatoes.
38 on Rotten Tomatoes. And what did I say, like 35 or something like that? 32?
You were the closest for that.
Yeah, my box office numbers are saying 25 million.
That's funny. I was more optimistic about it than both of you.
Right, and you
just
seemed to
by a
like
little
it,
bit,
liked it
and I
the
like
least.
it the least out of all of us.
Well, hey, there you go. So what's the score at?
We had Insidious, and if I remember correct, you each got one for Insidious.
Yeah, I think we
One
were
of us got the
dead split.
Rotten Tomatoes score, the other got the box office. God Particle, I think Eugene got the Rotten Tomatoes score. There was no box office, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it should be 3-2.
Okay. All right. Well,
Matisse is up by one.
baby.
we'll update that as more of these movies come out. But let's get into our main topic for the day. Like we said, we're talking about the Poughkeepsie Tapes. The Dowdle brothers are kind of interesting to me because they have some really dumb fucking movies.
Yeah, if you don't know who they are, you've definitely heard of their fantastic remake of Wreck, the Spanish zombie film called Quarantine.
Which fucking sucks.
Sucked. It blew its load right from the start. Posters, advertisements. I've never seen the original, but I hear from anybody who
Wreck
has.
is good. Wreck is
pretty good.
good, but Quarantine is a hot, stupid mess. Did they write Devil?
I believe they wrote and directed it.
Oh,
yes.
they did directed too. Fuck,
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
a
yeah,
really,
right, 'cause-
Did it? Ooh.
Yeah.
that's a really fucking terrible movie. The M. Night Shyamalan produced Devil,
Right,
about
'cause-
4 people stuck in an elevator with the devil.
Whatever goodwill you can give to Quarantine for how it was butchered in the marketing, Devil had all the opportunity and it did. Oh,
No,
God,
it's a
that's
fucking
bad
stupid
one.
movie.
Fell right on its face.
And then they did As Above, So Below, right?
another
found
Catacombs, Blair Witch movie.
which I never saw because it looked really fucking stupid.
And then they did No Escape, where it's not a horror movie. It's about Owen Wilson and his family trying to escape, as it's at a South Asian country during a coup.
Oh yeah, I saw the previews for that. That
Yeah.
was kind of good. I
Well,
didn't see it. I
The
didn't see
crazy
it.
thing about all these movies is that even when they were absolute trash, all of them, made their money back, and more so. Like, they were, I would say, successes. So
well, they did the Waco miniseries that just wrapped up a few weeks ago,
I
right?
would totally recommend. Best TV show I've seen all year.
I only saw
wow.
the first
Amazing.
episode and I liked it a lot.
Same,
so
yeah,
I need to.
Incredible. Michael Shannon is incredible in it. Taylor Kitsch is
Michael Shannon's always
surprisingly
incredible.
good.
yeah, he needs a
as,
win.
David Koresh. Yeah, he does.
He was going the way of the next like Sam Worthington or Jai Courtney.
I mean, he was just in Shape of Water.
Oh, no, we were talking about Taylor Kitsch.
Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah.
you were talking about Michael Shannon needing a win.
no,
I'm
no,
like,
no,
what?
no.
No, Michael Shannon doesn't.
Shannon
Jai
is-
Courtney isn't in
is the
Shape of
king.
Water. It's Sally
yeah.
Hawkins falling in love with Captain Boomerang from Samurais.
That's the weird fucking thing is that like Waco's really good and the Poughkeepsie Tapes is a fucking fantastic movie. So I'm very confused about the Dowdles. Like, why are some of their movies so bad
Yeah.
and then some of their things so good? It's like there's no middle ground. It's on opposite ends of the spectrum. It's either the worst thing ever or the greatest thing ever.
Well, if I had been only told that the Dowdle brothers made Quarantine all the way up to Waco. With Waco, I was enjoying, but all those other movies just
No, they all suck.
being all trash. I feel so much differently because of seeing the Poughkeepsie Tapes, where I don't mind. I'm happy these guys are still making movies because
Yeah, I mean,
man,
good for them.
this because I had not seen it until you guys had talked about it, and we chose it for this episode. And
Well,
man,
yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's so crazy because all their movies are pretty panned on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes. Even Poughkeepsie was,
Yeah.
pretty.
Poughkeepsie's got like a 6.1 rating on IMDb and
Yeah,
like
it's in
a
the
2 like a
50s on Rotten Tomato.
it's a 2.9 on Letterboxd.
Which part of that might be because this film seems to have a very weird history of its distribution, and it was supposed to be in theaters.
Yeah,
but it was
yeah.
pulled, and
It was made in like 2007 and it was supposed to have a theatrical release.
There were trailers before movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the studio pulled it we were just talking about like without even telling the Dowdles or something
Yeah,
like
they
that.
found out on the internet.
The fucking makers of the movie found out that it wasn't getting a theatrical release on the fucking internet. Like, how sad is that? It was just like nowhere for years and years, and then it got a video on demand release in 2014, I think.
Yep. And then
wow.
this last November, it just finally got a Blu-ray release. Thank God.
Yeah, so I do think part of this this film being so under the radar is that like they got fucked when it came out. Seriously.
it seems like this is only a movie that you had to find it through specific avenues in certain bays, you may say, from various pirates. You could find this movie because it just seemed to be so hard to attain anywhere else, and it's such a sad thing. It's great that it's on Blu-ray now.
Yeah, I'm really glad that it's
people-
gotten a Blu-ray release because this is a really truly fantastic, well-made film.
In a way, I think having it so storied in its release kind of builds the legacy of the movie.
I think
in
so
a way.
too. I think so too, especially because like you could very technically call it a found footage movie, but it's more kind of like a mockumentary.
Well, it's a mockumentary about found footage.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right. Well, it's done in the style of like one of those daytime TV true crime shows,
Forensic
like Forensic
Files-esque.
Files, just like super over dramatized. They look like they were all made in the 90s, even if they were made a year ago. Just like really super cornball. But this movie, like, I think that style overall really benefits what makes it so good. And also, like, this is a super disturbing movie.
Yes.
Like, we all watch a lot of like really violent, gory shit, and this is one of the only horror movies that I find really, really viscerally disturbing that like actually affects me.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too, like the majority of stuff you see that's disturbing in this movie is not even shown. It's off screen.
The restraint is really excellent.
So much is left to the imagination, and your imagination just pushes the worst imaginable things.
Of course.
And that's why it's so disturbing. If we saw the Water Street Butcher just cutting people up, it wouldn't have the same effect.
Yeah, the majority of the kills are off screen, but what it does decide to show you, and at the times that it decides to show you these things too, also like really hammers that stuff home. I think it has a lot of restraint, but every now and then it will show you something that is just so horrifying that it just like seeps into your fucking bones, you know? Like, well, I've seen this movie twice now, I think. I think this was the second time I watched it, and this is not a movie that I can go back to again and again and again. Like, I have to take some time between my viewings of this movie, you know?
Well, I think the Dartles do an amazing job with this movie of taking the shortcomings of a limited budget and using them to push the authenticity of the film. You know, in low-budget films, you don't often get the greatest actors, but that's, you know, mended by using Forensic Files style, docudrama, and found footage as a kind of a conceit, and even video quality, like that's masks because it's, you know, it's a found footage movie.
Well, so the premise is police investigators find in an abandoned house just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videotapes showing murder, torture, just chronicling like the years and years and years long career of a serial killer who they have been chasing for all this time and unable to catch.
The Water
Street Butcher. This takes place in Poughkeepsie, New York, hence the title, the Poughkeepsie Tapes. So apparently where your family has a house upstate, Eugene?
Yes, right. Just one of those small, nice little quiet places. It can add on to so much horror in a lot of these things to not make it, I don't know, in like rundown neighborhoods or to place it in like bigger cities, but just to know where you at least suspected that.
Well, right, and that's the thing about this killer too. He's like, they basically build him up to be the most prolific, smartest serial killer in history, which, I mean, we joke about, but they do.
Hannibal Lecter went for an art degree.
they do a really good job of that. It seems that his sole MO is changing his MO.
Yes.
And taunting the police.
That is how we. You know, we always say, well, how didn't he get caught sooner? It's because he always switched it up. Anytime
because he never does anything the same. He gets a thrill from the hunt. For any evidence that the police ever found is because he led them right to it.
Right, yeah, so he's always 3 steps ahead of the game.
Yeah, it's like you said, Hannibal Lecter, kind of bullshit, you know?
I feel like some of the amazing serial killer stuff works because they kind of ramp it up through the movie.
Yeah,
like at first they downplay him a little bit, and as the movie goes on, like they add more and more like crazy, surreal-ish stuff.
The thing I really appreciated about this is because when I was younger, there was a TV in my room, and my mom would always go in and watch things on court TV, all of these true crime stories, and so they would always really freak me out. But then I would always watch some where they were just so cheesy. They would have the reenactments and the narration, like, and then he went on a killing spree, and just while it has some sillier moments just with the actors that they had, because sometimes that's just you always get professionals, but that this is a well-made fake true crime show.
Exactly. They hide a lot of the low budget and the bad acting and stuff in the fact that it is a forensic files style true crime show, you know.
Right. There's no joke that's really trying to be made from that, like, and hey, shit, that stuff is really schlocky sometimes. I feel like it sometimes veers into like exploitation.
Oh yeah, some of these sure, I agree.
That they didn't want to go for that they actually went out to do this seriously,
and they do such a good job of it too that I think if you showed this to somebody who wasn't aware of its existence, you could probably convince them that it's actually real.
Yeah.
Blair Witch style, it's like they don't do anything that puts it too far outside of the realm of possibilities. I think that's part of what makes it so disturbing too, is that it's scary in the way that only something real can be scary.
Yeah.
You know?
And they never try and become too omniscient with the way that the murderer thinks. Like the first setup we get for him, they don't know what could have set off this spree within him. We see because he starts recording it, but they say it could have been a fight with a loved one. He could have been laid off from a job, whatever that was. Like that's when we're introduced, and I think that's really great too. That it's not one specific thing, that it could be anything that could set him off, because that happens with any killer. One thing makes them snap.
Right. There's that speculation that you don't know really what did it. It's just that he at a certain point decided he was going to kill someone and then very quickly realized that he was good at it.
Yes.
And started branching out. And that progression in the movie is really nice. His first kill or whatever that we see is him abducting a little girl out of her yard, and then they find her body later. And fortunately, this is the kind of thing, unlike Mother, where they're not going to show child murder, you know, that's there. They have a lot of restraint. And another thing that I love so much about this movie is that apparently it was shot digitally, but you would never guess it. Like the tapes look so realistically like VHS, like they're degraded, like they're old tapes, like there's color distortions, image distortions, and the older the tapes, the more heavily they're distorted. So it's like you could very well believe that these are just tapes that have been sitting in somebody's fucking closet for years, you know. And we only learned, just before we recorded this episode, that they did actually record it digitally. And did the effects in After Effects, I believe.
There was a real great interview that I was able to find with him where he got, because it's hard to find a lot of the details.
There's very little information.
I couldn't even find a production budget on the film. So.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I looked too. I was curious for the budget, and I can't find one. Basically, all I know about the production is that they shot this in like 15 days or something like that.
Which is insane.
Which is wild. I mean, I guess there's nothing they do that's that would be too terribly complicated to shoot.
But even a production that's a short production.
That's an extremely short production. For a feature-length film, like, fuck, in college we were working on our senior films for for over a year, you know, and those are short films. Just to have such a quick turnaround in terms of production is just
crazy.
Just absolutely nuts.
Yeah, well, with that first kill, that first recording that we get from the killer, I think it sets up what the director really finds scary, how to build up a scary scene in a movie, because it doesn't do anything more than just a camera on this girl playing in front of her yard. But we know that this killer has got other intentions, and the warping on the video as well. In that interview, he says that it was used as a device in a way that the moments that you wanted to see the most, to have the most clarity, is when it had the most, like,
the distortion. Is the heaviest, yeah.
Right, and I think it really grips you in those moments, like what is happening on the screen, and then to also not have the full picture, like...
Yeah, it really heightens that anxiety, you know. Like, you don't want to see what's going to happen, but part of you does want to see it, and, you know, it's just like...
because you're trying to focus in on it, too, because you have to look through so much. Like,
yeah.
It's almost like egging you on to have to observe closer.
It's not a gory movie at all. There's very little actual blood.
And honestly, the most disturbing scenes in this movie have no violence in them.
One scene where we actually do see blood that I think is one of the more disturbing scenes. But yeah, for the most part, a lot of those really visceral, unnerving scenes are not violent.
Oh yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that this killer that we have, he's not a reclusive sort of character. He's talking a lot in these videos.
Yeah.
One of his next kills, he gets picked up by this family. That stuff is evocative. Just knowing that a killer isn't someone that you'll notice right off the bat, and that a lot of it just comes from the way that he's playing with his victims.
Yeah.
And just
Right. Well, and playing with the police too. We get one scene early on where the police are checking gas station surveillance cameras along this particular route that they think he must have driven, and they see him, but he's obscuring his face, and he signs something. He spells out something in sign language at the camera, which leads them to where they found a body, and they say that he even did this before he picked up the people that he was going to kill and later dump at that place. Like, he's thinking so far ahead. He knows that at a certain point the police are going to see this tape, and he's just taunting them, you know. And it's stuff like that is makes him such a scary villain, you know. He could probably go totally unnoticed if he wanted to, but it's fun for him, for the police to be looking for him.
right. In that interview as well, I don't mean to go back to it all the time, but really it's one of the few pieces of info that I was able to get on the movie. There isn't even a commentary track, apparently, been found out on the Blu-ray that was
Unfortunately,
released.
there are some interviews, but it's pretty sparse.
Right, this is because this is like one of the first movies where I am like genuinely interested to know how they were able to do some of these things.
Yeah, same.
But that he got inspiration from, well, a whole bunch of different murderers, but one of them specifically was Edmund Kemper, who was recently psychoanalyzed in the show Mindhunter. Great show on Netflix. I would highly recommend it.
Oh yeah, that's right. I thought that I saw that name in the interview too, and I thought that sounded familiar.
Right, because he was just an incredibly intelligent killer, a big guy, so he was able to overpower his victims just to have someone who is so calculating. You want to think that these killers, like, they're just, you know, they're deranged, that they're just insane, aren't thinking properly, but sometimes they are. They just decide they want to kill, and that's some of the creepiest shit. It's a smart bad person.
Well, that one of the most effective scenes, I think, is later in the movie. They're interviewing a cop or an FBI guy, I don't remember exactly, and he's like, I'm gonna read you just a few of the profiles that profilers put together for these particular killings. He's just reading all of these profiles, and it's like every single one could be for a completely different person. Like, they don't correspond, you know, and it leads you to wonder, like, does this killer have a knowledge of profiling? Like, he's actively...
Does this guy watch court TV
Does he watch Forensic Files? This guy is like actively changing the way he kills people every time to purposely mislead the cops.
Which could be... It's one of those things where it might start to pull the curtain back a bit, where you're like, okay, they're trying to build him up so much, like, this feels like it was just, you know, constructed for the movie's sake. But we get so much time with the killer. I think that it makes sense and it works really well, because they don't just say it and then never make you really understand it that way.
Well, yeah, and the movie is so short too. At like 80 minutes.
Yeah,
you don't
81 minutes.
You don't really have too much time to linger on some of the flourishes of the movie.
Well, yeah, because the killer is also, he's a very theatrical killer. And one of the first times we ever actually see him on camera, he's hiding in who will end up being his main victim. He's hiding in her closet, and he's wearing one of those plague doctor, or as it's said in the movie, a doctor of the plague.
Yeah, like one of those like very theatrical,
like the bird mask thing.
with the long beaky nose,
Right.
And we see him wearing that a lot throughout the movie, sometimes accompanied by a cape and a ruffled collar, and it's like, it's the kind of thing that should be laughably dumb.
I thought it was going to be really goofy,
but
that.
somehow it's just not.
No,
like,
because
somehow it is actually effectively creepy, I think.
it also does what Rob Zombie's Halloween could not do, is to properly describe what can make a mask creepy, because not only does he wear a mask, he ends up putting a mask on his main victim.
That I mean, it's really the central conceit of the movie is that at a certain point he kidnaps this young woman, Cheryl Dempsey, who's played by John Eric Dowell's real life wife.
Yes, right. Which thank God that they could find someone who could commit to this kind of performance, because the kind of shit that she has to go through and perform in this movie.
It's hard. She's a trooper. Like, some of those scenes must have been very difficult. He does not kill her for some reason. There's something he likes about her, and he just keeps her hostage for years, just torturing her both physically and mentally and emotionally, just keeps her around. He calls her slave. That's one of the first scenes, is he asks her name, and when she says her real name, he says, "No, your name is slave."
Yes. And then he at some point puts a mask over her as well, and
puts her in like this weird, I guess, like, it reminds me of the kind of dress that you see like the German girls wearing at like Oktoberfest.
Right,
you know?
yeah, it's like super frilly.
Yeah. He puts her in one of those and puts a woman's
female
mask.
Michael Myers mask.
Yeah, on her.
Which that's the one of those things where it showed me how scary that sort of thing is, because we see her in a lot of moments of pain where she's crying and being tortured, but we can't read her. All it is just this blankness.
Yeah, all you can see is her eyes, and she does a lot with her eyes. You can see the pain and the fear and the terror, which was scary because have such emotional eyes and such a blank, emotionless face with this mask is a really interesting, scary dichotomy. And her mantra ends up becoming, "You are the master, and it pleases me to serve you," something like that.
Right.
Yeah. That we just hear her repeat over and over and over and over and over again.
Oh, I think one of the best scenes in this movie, and one of the scenes that's most indicative of like this movie's MO in terms of how to scare the audience. One day, a couple Girl Scouts come over to the house, and he welcomes them inside, gets them a Coke.
I like to think that he's still wearing the plague doctor mask, wearing the cape, but I know that can't be right.
No, of course not. But it would be. It's a funny
But there's
thought.
such a tension throughout the whole scene, because as an audience, we know that's not a place they want to be.
Right, and that he's already murdered a 4-year-old girl from the beginning, so there's no reason why.
The questions he's asking them, you can tell he's calculating whether he can comfortably kill them or not, and not be caught. He's asking them things like, do you live around here? Do you tell your parents where you're going? When you leave, like, do your parents know where you are now? And it's so tense because you're like, is he going to kidnap and murder these two young girls? Like, you just don't know. And then he decides that it's not worth the risk, and he lets them go.
Well, I think that one is constructed so well because there are like a lot of little things. First off, one of the girls is more suspicious of the situation. One of them doesn't drink the juice that she's given.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
And
she doesn't take a sip at all. Well, that's another thing. It's like you don't know if he's drugged their drinks or not. Like, it's
right, and that then we hear like this noise, and and we know it to be Cheryl. I just thought about this now, but like that after the noise is being made, and he realizes that he's not going to be able to buy those cookies because, like, he says it's a raccoon in the basement, and he's asking if they want to go down there. I think that Cheryl making that noise was also her trying to make sure those girls weren't killed.
Well,
it could be.
Cheryl wasn't in the basement.
Well, no, but that she was like under that table, so he was going to lead them into the basement to murder them. And
well,
so
I think it's implied that there's another girl in the basement.
Yeah, it was
he has
a prostitute, I think.
He decides to let the girls go. He tells them to show themselves out, and you get that moment of relief, like, whew, thank God, like, these girls just dodged like the biggest fucking bullet. And then he pulls the tablecloth off of the coffee table in the living room where they're sitting, and Cheryl is under the table, bound, you know, wearing her mask and with a mirror on the floor right in her face, so she has to look at herself. And it's just like, the first time I saw that, like, that shit still hits me really hard, just knowing that she was in the room the entire time, like right where he's sitting and talking with these two little girls, and then to just have that just be revealed that
Have
she's
the tablecloth ripped out from under you.
yeah, literally, like, have the rug pulled from under you, and that she's just there the whole time. And that's a very scary scene, I think.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most effective scenes in the movie, honestly, because like there's no violence in it, you know. It's all done through implications and what the audience knows and expectations.
Right. Which some people might find that boring, but to them I'll say you can stick to watching your fucking like creature feature movies and just
whatever.
People call this movie boring, but Paranormal Activity not boring. Like,
right. This movie, like, boring is one of the last words that I would ever use to describe this movie. Like, this is not a boring movie.
This movie is just overflowing with tension throughout.
Oh, yeah, it's so tense. Like, watching this movie is like an 80-minute anxiety attack, you know? Like,
and it does not try and give you any happy message near the end. There is no comeuppance here at all. And it's one of the situations where, like, Cheryl Dempsey has been tortured and abused. There's footage of the killer, like, telling her that he's killed her whole family and she should be thanking him because she wanted them dead. And then after all these years of him switching up his MO, of him like he's like we mentioned, he's murdering prostitutes at a certain point, like pretending to be a cop. Which
he creates this profile of the Water Street butcher serial killer where he's only killing prostitutes and he's impersonating a cop.
I will actually say, like, that whole little bit feels like a real segue in the whole movie.
It does, but it works for me, though, because especially they have one of the profiles or something explaining he was doing that so people would think, oh, well, if you're not a prostitute, you're safe, or if you're not a woman, you're safe, because the Water Street butcher only kills prostitutes or whatever.
It's just more, and it's because then there's a whole, like, there's a cop that they find his DNA and that he's been framed. But the way, like, they describe it, like, he was able to get his semen from, like, a fertility clinic.
From a fucking sperm bank. How does that happen?
It's like, and also the cop, like, they never have any footage of him speaking, because as soon as this guy talks, as an audience, we're gonna immediately know that isn't the killer. And so that all that stuff like that feels a little more like set up for convenience and to throw.
Well, yeah, it's a bit of misdirection, you know. They approach it like this cop was the real killer. They don't tell you otherwise. You know, they found his DNA, they arrested him, you know, he was on trial, and then he was put on death row and executed, and then right after he's executed, then we get a videotape shot by the killer of when he's sitting in a bar while a news report is on about the guy he's about to be executed in an hour. And so it's not.
I definitely agree that the Jim Foley subplot is probably the most out there part of the movie. But I actually think it's incredibly effective in that it's like that one moment of possible payoff that just gets cut down.
It doesn't, but like the fact that we never hear his voice at all throughout it, I think it overplays its hand too immediately for me. Like, I wasn't convinced by any of it.
Well, yeah, I think we as the audience
I'll say it's well done, but
I don't think it's necessarily supposed to try to truly mislead the audience. I think as the audience, we know that there's no way that this guy is actually the killer. But what I appreciate is that the film doesn't say that outright, like, oh, well, they got the wrong guy. Like, they play it like there's the possibility that this was the right guy. And even though I don't think they really intend to truly mislead you, you know, I think they.
Well, and that's the thing.
That's what makes it like a true crime documentary. You know,
if you were making a Forensic Files type of thing, you would make it after the fact, and after the fact, they would know that he's not the actual guy. The most out there part of the Jim Foley subplot was the 9/11 stuff.
That he was executed like 2 days before 9/11, and then they realized that they had got the wrong guy, and that they published it in the paper, but because 9/11 happened, it got pushed from front page to page 6 or something like that.
This is the second movie I've seen since Spotlight that's painted 9/11 as an inconvenience to the plot.
Yeah, to the law, exactly.
Sorry, the biggest terrorist act in history happened when this murderer was coming around, or when priests were molesting children.
It's the Catholic Church.
The Water Street Butcher was in collusion with Al Qaeda.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church.
And the Catholic Church.
Oh my God. We really do need Spotlight.
It's one big conspiracy. Someone call Michael Keaton.
Yeah. Give us the director's commentary on Poughkeepsie Tapes. You have the answers.
Like, even though the 9/11 thing works in the narrative of the movie, I always groan a little bit when it comes up.
That was really good.
It's one of those things.
It's
like goddamn 9/11. It's like, yeah, goddamn 9/11. You know, like,
because this entire movie, I kept thinking about another fake documentary we've mentioned on the podcast, Lake Mungo, which I really
which is
enjoyed.
Actually the number one recommended film on IMDb if you go to the Poughkeepsie Tapes page.
And that's one where, like, I wouldn't say any of it's particularly cheesy. Like, it's done with a very, like, serious tone, but it also suffers around the middle because, I mean, all of it is like thematically appropriate, but that it's there because they like realized we need to try and add something in more, and
we gotta pad it out.
Yeah, right. We gotta pad it out. We gotta make them scarier.
I would say the Jim Foley subplot of the Poughkeepsie Tapes is probably the most noticeably constructed and different from the rest of the movie. You know, but it still works for me. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Oh yeah,
you know, I appreciate, like, I think it's even just the idea to do something like that shows some real care on the filmmaker's parts, because that's the kind of thing that a stupider movie would not even consider, you know? Regardless how you feel about how effective it is in the context of the rest of the movie, just the concept is I think shows intelligence.
It kind of brings about, deeper ideas of the nature of justice and society too.
Yeah, absolutely. That an innocent man was wrongly accused and executed, and then a day after his execution they're like, oh shit, we fucked up, we got the wrong guy. It's like, well, at that point, I mean, how many lives have you destroyed, you know, aside from just killing this innocent man?
Yeah, it's like
you've also destroyed his legacy, his family's lives. You know,
he's just another victim of the Water Street Butcher.
Exactly,
he's another kill.
And how callously the documentary brushes that off too, I think is very effective. That it's just like a true crime show. It's like they don't go into like, well, shit, we really fucked up. You know, we executed an innocent man. You know, like, what is they of course just like totally brush it under the table. They go back to talking about the actual killer, you know, because that's what the movie's about. And then the Jim Foley thing becomes like you know, an afterthought. I think is very realistic and very effective.
After all of this playing with the police, I forget what it was that he sent to the police.
He sent the police a custom made map from MapQuest, which dates the fuck out of this movie. and that had a like an X on the map that said you missed one.
Yes, after Jim Foley
was executed. So that's how they knew they got the wrong guy. And they, through internet investigation, they found the address of his house from, you know, where he created the custom map or whatever.
It's pretty easy because only one person uses MapQuest.
Right, and just the killer. And so they think,
makes sense.
They think, oh, we fucking got him, you know. So they come in with the SWAT team and the helicopters and the dogs and the bomb squad and everything. And the house is completely empty, except for in the closet these boxes and boxes and boxes of VHS tapes numbered sequentially.
And
they find a closed up coffin looking box.
Yes. And they pop it open, and lo and behold, Cheryl Dempsey is alive somehow.
Just gaunt as hell, looking like a corpse straight up.
After being living in bondage for like 10 years or something like that, like a decade.
That's another thing I appreciated too, that they said Jim Foley was sentenced to death, but it took like 5 years for it to happen.
That was maybe the most I would say that's maybe the most unrealistic thing about it, is that he was only on death row for 5 years, because most people who are on death row end up dying in prison of old age before they're ever executed.
Hey, I mean, like,
serial killers, I guess.
Like, the fact that it didn't happen, like, immediately after he was sentenced, I thought that was just
sure, yeah. I mean, that's, you know, that's bureaucracy, you know, killers, but I guess for serial killers they expedite that process a little bit, but whatever. So they find Cheryl Dempsey. He's left her behind for them to find, you know, with all of his tapes, so they can watch all of this stuff.
Right. And usually in a movie,
it's like the ultimate taunt.
You would be like, oh, it's great that she survived this whole thing, but man, it does not let you feel good about that.
No, it does not. Well, they talk about her wounds and, you know, her hospital time, and they say, you know, oh, her wounds were getting worse, and we didn't know why while she was in the hospital, you know, like her bones were not healing and stuff. And they'd say, well, it's because she had been living with daily pain for such a long time that she didn't know how to live without it. So she was torturing herself in the hospital. And that's why she wasn't healing, because at that point, she was so mentally broken that she didn't know how to live without constant horrific pain, which is, you know, it's one of those things that just kind of makes your skin crawl. And then at the very end, we get the filmmakers managed to secure an interview with Cheryl. And that's another one of those scenes where it's not violent at all, but it's still just so...
one of the scariest.
Just so scary. She's just emaciated, you know, you can see in her eyes, like she's just completely broken. She's not there. And basically all the interview is her saying over and over again, I don't know what you want me to say.
Truly just a broken person.
Because we see earlier in the film when she's first kidnapped, the killer is having her say specific things. He's conditioning her so she won't say anything without his permission. So she's just like, I don't know what you want me to say. Like, what do you want me to say? And then they tell us that like 2 weeks after that interview, she killed herself or whatever.
And a suicide note proclaiming her undying love to the killer.
For the master.
Yep, right.
And saying that he would come back for her or something. And then we do see that after she was buried, her body was dug up and
right, which
and
is
removed.
Actually it's a video that we see
at the very beginning, at the very beginning, I think, of a body being pulled out of the ground, and that's one of those things where at the beginning you're like, what the fuck, what is that? And so that's a really nice callback, you know. know,
Yeah.
at the end. And just to see that like the overall effect of what this man has done to Cheryl, and how she, like, you know, in true Stockholm syndrome style, she ended up falling in love with him, even though he was, you know, abusing her horribly on a daily basis, because it's just at a certain point, it's all she knows. It becomes normalized.
There's a great shot in the Cheryl interview where she's like touching her hair or something.
Oh yeah, she scratches her head, and she's just missing a hand.
Yeah.
That's like they softball that the fuck in there, and that's really effective. You know, because you can't, you know, the shot is, you know, maybe from her chest up to her head with a little bit of headroom. Standard interview.
Another great example
framing.
of restraint, right there.
Yeah, and then
it's all implied.
Yeah, at a certain point, she reaches up to scratch her head with the fucking nub where her hand used to be, and it's like, oh fuck, okay.
Yeah,
Like-
I think lesser filmmakers would have pounded that.
Oh yeah,
element home
absolutely,
much
absolutely. Yeah, man, it's fucking wild to me how amazing this movie is, and how effective and truly scary this movie is, and then just like everything else that the Dowds have done other than Waco is just such garbage.
Yeah, it's super weird because like Waco is incredible. There's a lot of like exploitation-y movies out there where like the focus is all about the gore and the gross out stuff.
Right.
A lot of times those movies are gross, but they're not scary.
No, like I'm so
necessarily.
desensitized to gore.
And
Like
that's the thing.
it just does
you know,
nothing
like
for
having
me.
such gore and stuff on your movie distances you from what's happening, you know? I think
Yeah.
because, you know, it's done in a way where, you know, we're watching through the medium of film. We know it's not real. We can justify it in our head. With a movie like this, where it frames itself in such authenticity,
Yeah.
and leaves so much to the imagination, like a lot of that is just pulled out from under us. And because of that, even though it's not gory or bloody, like it's probably the most disturbing horror movie, one of them, that I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, hands down. It's a fucking feel bad movie. There's no way to watch this movie without feeling like absolute shit afterwards. Like I said, it's not something that I can return to regularly, because it is in so many ways such an unpleasant viewing experience, but intentionally, and that's what makes it so fucking good. Like, I'm just blown away by how effective this movie is, and how, with all of the shit that I watch, all of the horror stuff that I watch, that a movie can still impact me in such a way, like disturb me so to my core. And that is truly good filmmaking. And it's because of this movie that I will hold out hope for the Dowdles, and I'll check out their future stuff and just hope that they're gonna hit another home run like the Poughkeepsie Tapes, and not just do another fucking Devil or Quarantine.
Well,
you know?
hopefully when they do eventually hit another home run, it won't be pulled before it gets to the
Yeah,
Yes,
Jesus
yeah.
Christ.
One thing and this is a segue, this is dumb, but this killer's active in the 90s, and then he escapes, and so he could still being active with his obsession with videos and stuff. I'm so sorry that I thought about this, but what if he grows up to become Stephen Ray in Fear.com?
Oh my God. No, fuck
When
off.
looking through the lens, there's a disconnect.
Well, it's because I know that's not true, because he didn't have the stupid fucking voice that Stephen
Yes,
Ray
oh
had.
my, imagine if he had that voice.
Oh my
throughout the
God,
whole
I think I would
movie.
hate that. I think I would hate the movie then.
You will call me master.
What is your name, slave?
God, I really have to agree with you, and I'm so thankful that I was finally able to see this, and to know that it was just after the Blu-ray was released as well. Just seems like a great time to check this out.
Yeah,
And for
absolutely.
anyone who hasn't heard about this, or who has and hasn't known where to find it, just you really have to do yourself a favor and check this movie out. If you're a fan of horror movies, this is
I would recommend the shit out of this movie, but with a disclaimer that this is a truly horrifying film, and that you are not going to have a pleasant experience when you're watching it. But if you're a fan of craft and just good filmmaking, and you're masochistic enough to make yourself feel like shit, this is the fucking movie for you. I really could not recommend this movie more to a specific type of horror fan. This is not a film that's for everybody. Absolutely not.
I saw on the Blu-ray page that it's a region-locked American release. So
oh, really?
I don't know how easy or hard it would be to find it internationally. So if you're listening to this internationally, hopefully you can find it. I mean, it's on video on demand, so anything, you should be able to see it through that. But I
can recommend a bay where pirates are known to dwell and do their thing, firing cannons and sword fighting and stuff. And maybe if you were to take a trip to said bay, then maybe one of said pirates might have a copy of this movie lying around somewhere that they'd be able to let you watch.
Yes,
you never know. You never know.
Make sure you bring some VPN with you so you don't get scurvy.
But yeah, I like that they end this movie saying that he is still out there somewhere, and that somewhere in America, probably in a small town, the disappearance and murder rates are slowly rising, right, and that he could be living among you.
That is what, thinking about it, sure, they're all, none of them are really big name actors, but there are a lot of people that are interviewed and that are on the screen, and I gotta say, overall, all of them they're put in work for their roles.
I mean, you buy it. They feel like real people. It has that corny Forensic Files style quality to it, but it feels authentic. I would really be curious someday to show this movie to somebody who's never fucking heard of it and tell them that it's a real true crime documentary and see if they fucking buy it, because it's so authentic. It feels so fucking real, I guess I'll segue into ratings then. This is, without rehashing too much, just an incredibly well-constructed, visceral, scary, just nightmare of a fucking movie. And it has one of the most profound effects on me that any movie ever has, especially horror. And for that reason, I'm gonna give it a strong fucking 5 out of 5. You could argue that some things are corny or that don't work, or that the Jim Foley subplot is kind of contrived or whatever. But for me, just the overall effect that this movie has on me is so profound that it's a sign of good filmmaking when a movie can impact you on such a visceral level. So 5 out of 5 from me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I feel like this is one of the most effective horror movies I've ever seen. It's one of the scariest horror movies I've ever seen, and it does so without ever feeling gratuitous.
Right.
You never get an excessive amount of gross out stuff. It never has enough time to have lulls where you kind of fall into disbelieving anything. It's so tightly paced and well shot. It's just such a good movie. It's one of my personal favorite horror movies.
Same.
It affected me in such a way when I first saw it. It even builds up on repeat viewings, I would say. It's not a movie you want to come back to very often because it's so disturbing, but it's, at the same time, it's not graphic, so it's not like you're submitting yourself. It's more psychological more than anything.
It's the kind of disturbing that makes you happy for what you have in your life.
Exactly,
It's a cathartic kind of disturbing, thank God my life is, in the grand scheme of things, pretty fucking all right,
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's not going to make you feel good, but after it's over, you're going to be grateful for what you have.
Well, and this movie does one of the most masterful things I've seen in a low budget movie, which I don't see very often, which is using the shortcomings of the budget to emphasize the strengths of the movie, where it feels more authentic because some of the cheap acting or the low budget film quality or film style. So yeah, I think this is a near perfect movie. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, even with the cheesier moments, none of it ever really took away from what I thought was just really great filmmaking and a lot of attention to what can be scary. I think, I guess I'd want to say psychological horror, but I think that a really great horror movie at a certain point is psychological, that it plays with your perception of things and just
I think you're right.
how the world works around you. And so I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 as well. I probably would have loved this more if it was in a different language.
6 out of 5.
Yeah,
6 out of 5. If this had been a French movie.
Yeah, this is French. I would have fucking gone crazy.
All right, well, that is a resounding, unanimous, perfect score for the Poughkeepsie Tapes from us. So I don't know what you want me to say. I don't think we can recommend this movie anymore. So
I think this is the first all 5-star review.
Yeah, I think the
you're
next
right.
closest was
I think you're right.
Pulse, I think. That was like
Pulse was up there. Dead Alive was
Alive was
yeah,
up there.
yeah, that's true.
But I think this is the first time we have all given a perfect score for a movie.
This is the first movie on our Golden Greats.
Yeah, Golden Great.
Momentous,
Perfect
momentous,
5.
perfect 5. So if you like really, really fucking scary movies, then see the Poughkeepsie Tapes. Find it. Buy the fucking Blu-ray. Honestly, like give them your money. They deserve it.
Yeah.
Or otherwise that bay that I was talking about.
I know some torrents that are pretty kick-ass.
Hey,
so.
we don't use that word on our show.
Oh yeah, I know some turrets.
Some turrets.
Yeah, some turrets.
If you live in the States, you shouldn't have too hard of a time finding this. If you're international, might be a little bit harder, but worth the effort, I think. Well, next week we are unfortunately not going to be doing a full episode. We're going to be doing another mini pod just because it's WrestleMania this weekend, and we are we're getting psyched for that and having a big old party, and we are not going to be in any state to record the morning after WrestleMania. So expect another shorter episode from us next week. I don't know if we've 100% decided on what that is going to be. Maybe Ravenous,
or
maybe See No Evil in honor of the WWE. But expect a mini pod from us again next week. If you like the show, you can give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We're still looking to bump up those numbers a little bit. You can follow the show at Pod People Pod on Facebook and Twitter. Engage with us. Tell us some movies that you want to see. Let us know what you think about the Poughkeepsie Tapes. All of that good shit. The show is produced and scored by our own Benny Boy Slave Sheets and edited by me, Slave. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome. I've been doing a lot of drunk tweeting lately, which is not great. So if you want to see me make a mess of myself, then by all means follow me on Twitter. Do either of you guys have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, if you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, email us at podpeoplepod@gmail.com.
It's 2018 and we still love getting emails.
I'm pivoting a bit in my back rubs. Now I'm selling dubs. So dubs and back rubs.
Dubs and rubs.
Yeah, dubs and can I use that? Dubs and rubs.
I'm gonna take a royalty though.
Dubs and rubs, and I will rub in the tub. So if you need a dub and a back rub in the tub, I'll be your bub.
Subs, not dubs.
Subs, not dubs. Exactly. Yeah, I ain't no submissive. I'm dub missive.
Until next time, I'm Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Ben Sheets, your boy.
And I am Eugene. Yeah, I'm reading that right. There we go.
Your name is Slave.
No.
Well, we are the pod people, and I don't know what you want me to say.
I don't know what you want me to say.
What do you want me to say?